Hello?
Hello, Jughead. This is Archie. Come over right away. It's a matter of life or death.
Oh, relax, Archie.
Attention, all true believers. Marvel Comics is on the air.
A friend of the unfortunate, enemy of criminals. In reality, Dan Garrett, a rookie patrolman, loved by everyone but suspected by none of being the Blue Beetle.
Boys and girls, your attention, please. Presenting a new exciting radio program featuring the thrilling adventures of an amazing and incredible personality. Faster than an airplane, more powerful than a locomotive, impervious to bullets.
Up in the sky, look!
It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman!
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, everybody? I hope you guys have been having a wonderful holiday. I think by the time this interview is going to air, Christmas will have passed. So, we're pushing onward to the new year. And as we get into the new year, right before that, I have an excellent guest for you guys. This is my sister from another mister, Afua Richardson. We got her in the house today, and we're going to have an excellent conversation about what she's been up to, how her year's been, what she's got planned for next year. And we're just going to have a great time. I don't know how much more excited I can get right now, other than to just jump up and start doing backflips and cartwheels, but my back is really hurting. So just take it from me that I am beyond excited. Look at this face. Do you see how excited I am? I'm excited. Let's get this interview going. That was my cold opening. Now we're going to have a warm opening. To welcome our very special guest, Afua Richardson. Afua, come on in.
Hey.
What is up, Afua? How are you doing?
How you doing? I'm pretty good. How was your holiday?
My holidays so far are great. It's
fantastic.
It's a great opportunity to catch up on things and to catch up with you. How have you been? This has been a very productive year for you.
Yeah, I felt like I'd backed away from comics for a little while. I had to get some issues with my health and my heart right, and I started dipping my toes back into the creative space. And I say that, but literally every day I'm working.
And here's the thing, I can't say that you've really not been involved. I mean, like in 2023, you were involved in the Spider-Verse movie. I mean, you've been doing a lot of like freelance work and taking on a lot of freelance projects that are very heavily involved in comics.
Yeah, I've been consulting for EA Games on a comic book based video game that I can't really talk about, but also I've been doing some character designs for a sort of comic based animation project, but I've also been working on my project. Most of all, I've been putting my long overdue book in the priority seat, and it's been really nice. It's been fun, building worlds and really ironing out all the nitty-gritty of my mermaid universe.
Yeah, you've done a tremendous amount of work. We've had a lot of conversations about it personally, but just so we can kind of catch everybody up to speed, and of course we're going to go at your pace. Do you mind telling us all about your project? Because this is something that's very personal to you that you've been working on for a while.
Absolutely. I am creating my first creator-owned as a professional called Aquarius, the Book of Mer. On the surface, it's a modern retelling of mermaid myths and legends from many cultures across the globe and many different types of aquatic myth, from dragons to merfolk and meros and sirens and Sabawa Ilnus and nagas and all the things that I've been researching. But instead of just telling the stories as they are, I'm finding the common thread between them. So it's become more of a cultural research and alternative history project, as well as a book. And I've been making music and composing music for it, and basically taking all the things that I know how to do and throwing it into one pot of mermaid. So it took me a long time to just get back to the place where I felt more productive after, having a really bad head injury and just going through a lot of changes. And I feel like everybody post-pandemic had kind of needed to reinvent themselves for this new world that we're in. And I'm finally back on my feet and feeling more like myself.
Yeah, it's good to see you in this state. And you and I, we became a lot closer during the pandemic because, honestly, I have to say, a lot of what I managed to do with Warline was a result of us having conversations. Like, honestly, you gave me the confidence to really step out and do something that wasn't historical based. And because Warline is that first project for me. So, and I know a lot of the struggles that you've had, just to get to that point. But the one thing I have to say is the tenacity that you've had to get to the point where you're at is incredible. And the undertaking itself is enormous. You speak very matter-of-factly of, I'm just going to throw a bunch of these creative things into a pot like I do music. But you're not just making music. You want to make the best music. This is all coming from your soul. This is not just
thank you
work for hire work, and the same thing with your story too. There's a lot of personal touches to it as well from what you and I have talked about. I don't want to pull off anything that can be pulled off, but just so
right.
There's just so much that is going into this book beyond just simply making a comic.
Well, yeah, I realized that I realized a lot of things about myself as I started developing the main character, Astara, and I started reaching a lot of blocks or blockages when I was moving forward with the story, because I realized I had attached so many personal traumas to her struggle that I couldn't go through them because I hadn't dealt with them.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
To give a psychological and environmental, issue to a character and have her deal with it and get through it when I myself hadn't dealt with it. So every time I started to move forward, I'd start to doubt it and say, oh, well, this is too much and this doesn't feel like a good story. And it wasn't. It was just a bunch of awful things happening to a person plus mermaids. And that's not good storytelling. So it really took my cutting my story apart and really digging into the drives of what my characters want, and also what my antagonist and my instigators and all of the heralds and all of the different players and different roles in my book, what they wanted and how that corresponded with the stories that have already been told centuries ago. And so when I realized what I actually had to do, I'm like, man, this is a lot bigger than just telling a mermaid story. I've got to become a theologian. I've got to dig into different cultures, origin stories, and get them right. Because there are a lot of, I have Native American heritage, but there are a lot of stories that have been recorded about Native American legends that are incorrect. And so a lot of the details, like for instance, Unet Lanuhi in Aniunwia or Cherokee legends and stories, I don't like to use mythology because that almost demeans the story. Because when you look at a lot of these stories, these aren't the musings of primitive, superstitious people. This is history and natural phenomenon given a name. These are volcanic eruptions that are now the blood of giants. These are the calming of the Earth's terrain by thunder, lightning, and rainbows. This is the explanation of how our world was made through the lens of American indigenous cultures. And so you have to tread very carefully. Some of these stories, like I said about Unatlanuhi, when you look her up, she's considered a supreme being, but she's also considered the sun goddess. And then there's also an association with a spider. And so when you just read some paragraph on mythlock.com, it'll say, oh, Unatlanuhi is sun goddess who's also a spider. But when you have to actually dig and go into the archives and look up the anthropologist who went to reservations and spoke to the keeper of stories and had to translate what he was saying into a narrative, it's very, very different. It's very different than, what you'll find on Wikipedia, which, people are human. They'll hear information, they'll jot down what they can, and, it's not malicious. But if I'm going to task myself with telling something that's considered sacred, I better get it right. So there were a lot of times I started, doing research, wrote down my story, started drawing, and then realized once I picked up yet another book, I have maybe
conflicting facts. I dealt with that too with Easton Shin, because again, that's also a very secret history, and it's and I have to say, from based on everything you're saying, it sounds kind of like you went through an evolution, like a catharsis by doing this research. Like it's almost as if doing this research and figuring these things out has allowed you to work through some of the issues that Astara was having and making sense of it. And you and I have talked about that. Like I mentioned one time something that I was going through, and you gave me, you told me about a mythological story that was sort of related to it, that kind of explains, what I was going through. And I think that's true of all stories, right? All these myths and stories is that they are rooted in something that is real. It's not just, hey, we came up with a bunch of weird stuff, let's see what sticks.
Right. When we create stories, we're creating relationships that our audience hopefully wants to see the resolution of, because they can see a bit of themselves in it. They empathize with the character. They know someone like that, or something about the character's personality that we've shown them is something that they care to see evolve. And we've shown within our storytelling what is important to them, what has happened to them, and who they have to become in order to get it back. And I realized as I was writing these stories and getting all of this various information from different cultures, different books, different sources, that I needed to answer the questions that I was answering for my characters, for myself. And that putting together this book was putting myself together. And even the word myrrh, the book is called Aquarius, the Book of Myrrh. Myrrh means part. It is Latin. If you look at the etymology of myrrh, it just means a part, a fraction, a piece of. And this book is a piece of me. But it's only a piece of me. And I think one of the issues that I had to overcome was I am not my art. I'm not only my art. I am a person who defines their worth based on what I do, because I had so many people in my life who would say things and not mean it, or would make promises and break them. So I valued more what I could show, what I could do, what I could make. I felt like you are what you repeat. And so I based a lot of my worth on the things that I made. But when I got injured and I had a concussion and I felt like I couldn't see within my imagination and I couldn't make anything, well, I felt like I wasn't worth anything because I had anchored my self-worth to the things that I made. And so I had to have a perspective change. If I never made another piece of art, who am I? And I had to define that for myself.
That sounds like a very personal journey. Like, you know, and I think we all went through that in our own way, but this is very deep. So has the research you've done, is that how you started? Is that the first step you started to take in order to figure out the answer to that?
The first step for me was reestablishing my health. And in order to take care of me, I had to take care of my environment. I had to take care of something or someone else. So I started gardening. I started creating a pattern for myself where I woke up every day and I had to care for the well-being of this plant that could not communicate with me other than it's healthy, it's dying. And so I had to wake up and pay attention to the pattern. Well, this plant doesn't seem to like having direct sunlight all the time. Well, this one thrives a little bit more in rocky soil. And I would wake up every day, especially having a concussion when your thoughts are so scattered and fragmented in pieces. And I would water, I would tend to my office space, I would unpack something, I would start going through a story, I would work out, I would walk, I would do something to stimulate my mind. And then once I sat down and started writing, I felt like I was giving my character an experience and not just an adventure. Here's this thing that, you know, is formulaic. Here's the inciting incident. Here's the, you know, the big bad that comes in and destroys her world. No. What did I want? And what did my character want? Why do they want it? What are they willing to do? Who is in their life that is stopping them from getting it? What does it have to do with mermaids? Why mermaids? Why are mermaids important? What I find fascinating about mermaids is that every single culture has a flood myth and a mermaid story braided into their history somewhere for some reason. And a lot of them are similar. Not just that they're half fish and half, you know, pretty dame, but it's its role within the cultural reemergence. So here I was, a person who was putting myself back together after a catastrophe. And I'm finding these stories about a cataclysmic landscape and the people looking to these creatures that emerged from the water to rebuild. So you've got the Dogon tribe that have nomos that come from something that sounds like a spaceship out of the sky after a flood that teaches the people in Africa agriculture, farming, mathematics. You've got Fu Shi and Fu Kwa. These these two snakes intertwined that are holding a straight edge and a compass that come after a flood and help re-civilize the land.
Isn't it the symbol for medicine?
Yes, the caduceus, the two intertwining snakes with the wings that are like the hemispheres of the brain and the spine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny, that is the caduceus, and the symbol for medicine is the rod of Asclepius. But both of them belong to Apollo, and Asclepius is his son. So one is a stick that can utilize the power of snakes, and people will not be harmed by snake venom, and the other will either heal, or someone who is near death, give them peaceful transition. And I'm like, what? What is this? And so I'm digging into all of these different areas, and where there is no explanation, that's where I'm writing. So a lot of these stories have huge gaps. I have so many questions, and where there is no answer is where my story is, because that means that I have the liberty to give it meaning, because there's none there, and I will therefore not be altering what already exists. So I can educate as well as elaborate, and I'll also, give notes as to what is pertaining to the actual existing myth and what I've embellished. So while I'm writing my story, I'm also putting together a research project that I hope to, as I, release the book, do lectures and presentations on the things that I found, these different aquatic, snake-like, or aquarian creatures in history, in mythology, in legend, in medicine, in just agriculture, in archaeology, just everywhere, and making it make sense. So I've been having a lot of fun with that. And also, if you're going to be interacting or fighting or, dealing with sirens, you better be a musician, because these creatures are known to utilize sound as a weapon. So that's why music is an important part of the story, because it's not just, hey, here's a soundtrack to my this is integral to the creatures and their capabilities. And it's a nice excuse for me to sing.
Well, but that kind of leads into what I was going to say, is music is a part of your background. And,
Yes.
it's interesting, because I was talking with a very good friend of mine the other day, and, I've taken some time off of working on Yusun Shin to focus on Warline. And he said to me yesterday, this has taken too long. To which I responded, it's taken as long as it needs to take. And that's the case here too. I think what you're building here is something so large. You're not just researching a particular topic. You're researching the topic's effect on all of history and every culture, and intertwining comics, music, and other visual forms into this one thing. I think it's so much bigger than, just simply a comic book. But and not even to say that the comic book is the simple part. I think comics is the vessel for you, right? It's the means of which to tell the story that makes the most sense to you, because of your sequential storytelling abilities. So I think it's really hard to channel all these different types of ideas. Is it conflicting ever? Has it been conflicting, or is it just really a matter of, I need to get the answers I need to make sense of what the facts are. I need to like boil these facts down, or is it like I'm feeling music today, I'm gonna make music. I'm feeling I want to draw today, I want to draw.
Definitely the latter. At first it was conflicting because I didn't know how I was going to facilitate making music and braiding it into the story. And you're right, comics is the ship that I'm sailing this ocean on. Forgive the mermaid pun.
And just before we go on, since you mentioned it as the ship, another thing too about mermaids that I was thinking about, it's like back in the day, you know, traveling on water was how people would travel. Like there was no like airplanes or anything. So, you know,
Right.
there would be people on boats for months, you know, at a time, stuck with their own ideas, which is probably where a lot of these stories originated from. And there's probably a lot of gaps there. And so now you're almost kind of like on that ship, and the ship is the comic book. So I wanted to sorry. Go on with what you were saying.
No, you're right. You know, there is this urge for humanity to give meaning to the unknown. And if you are delirious and lost at sea and probably suffering from scurvy or something like that, you will imagine companionship on the back of a shark, or the forms that a manatee will take. Looks like that gal you left behind on the pier. And so even the barbarian that he was, Christopher Columbus, which is not actually his name. His name has been anglicized. He had an Italian name. But he would journal to the Queen, and as well as his generals, and they would write down when they were in the Caribbean, I've seen these mermaids of legend. They're not as attractive as previously mentioned. So even, I mean, there are so many records of people seeing something that they can't explain, and they've given it a name. Even, you know, within this century, during the 70s, out in small, you know, English countryside, there was an officer in the Coast Guard who was doing a night watch, and he took his flashlight out to the beach to make sure there weren't any people out there after curfew. And he sees this giant thing, and it growls at him. And he said it was the size of a bus, and he flashed a light at it, and its eye was the size of a basketball. And he screamed, and it slithered back into the ocean. And he was embarrassed to have to write it because he had to explain what it is that he saw verbatim. But who knows what he saw? I don't know if a whale can unbeach itself, but he saw something, and he had to write it down. And so within that realm of the unexplained, or animals that have yet to be discovered, or maybe things that were long extinct and are now just the stuff of legend, I'm finding the parallels and the streams between all of these different cultural phenomena as much as I can. And the knowledge of these stories and the knowledge of the songs that are associated with these stories is how my character will navigate the problems that she's facing in her life. And one thing that I've decided to do is sort of take the issues that I have with my own mother and her untreated mental illness, and giving them to my character's mother. And so there will be parallels, but it's obviously not going to be the exact same. But that was also something that I really had a lot of issues with. And I had to go and see my mom in hospice, and in order to just kind of have peace and have a resolution in my mind, and instead of replaying all of the things that had happened, just sort of seeing her in the state that she was in and say to myself, well, she's not that person anymore. She can't harm anyone. And I'm the person who's carrying around this story. I'm the one who has to lug this weight around with me. And I'm ready to let it go. And I'm ready to give it to a story instead of letting it sit and anchor me down.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because, like I've had these experiences. I think the first time I really felt this emotion was when I was watching the last 2 episodes of Mr. Robot. And I don't what triggered it was the main character was living in an idealized world where people who were dead had been alive, and they were very different. They were idealized versions of everything. And sometimes, I think I find myself very recently thinking about the past and idealizing the past, but realizing that the present is much better than the past, but there's still that idealization. And I don't even know if it's an idealization or a longing of some sort for some things to be better. If we could go back in time and change the past and make it not what it is now. Like, and I know that it's not the same thing with the experiences you had with your mom, but I'm sure with other things, are there things that like you kind of, while you've been on this emotional, personal journey, are there things like emotions like that you've had to kind of, come to terms with?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we all have some form of regret that we face, but I think what was paralyzing for me was that I felt stupid. I thought to myself, how could I have allowed those things to happen? That my career would be way further along than it is now if I hadn't A, B, C, D, or allowed, X, Y, and Z to happen in my life. And in doing so and lamenting over it and just being angry and upset and just allowing this storm to fester in my mind, I was poisoning my present. I couldn't see what was happening around me. I couldn't, but I had spent so much time of my life just saying, don't think about it, just move on. You can't change it, move forward. But what started to happen was I thought, well, whatever happens to me doesn't matter. Anything that happens, well, who cares? Just move on. And I wouldn't allow myself to process the emotions of what happened. I would just move on to the next thing. And then so I started to feel like, man, I am not worthy of happiness and respect, and I don't deserve to be happy. I have to earn it.
Do you still feel that way? Still feel that?
No.
You come out of that.
Thankfully not.
Yeah.
No, that if it was distorted. It's not that I have to earn happiness. It's that I have to make it. That it's not going to just happen. It's not just going to appear. That if I want to, it's kind of like being in shape. If I want to be in shape, then I'm going to have to work out. If I want to be happy, I have to want something. I have to have a goal, and if the goal is being content where I am, then I have to make my environment as such. I have to make myself as such. I have to alter my body to change my mind. So if it means
you have to establish that consistency. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
If it means, put on music and dance in my kitchen, then that's what I need to do. If it means like reorganize my sock drawer so when I open it, it's a gradient of colors. If that's what makes me happy and gives me joy, then that's what I need to do. Just what can I do right now with the things that I have to make myself happy so that I can make a space to bring more things in, not dwell on what I don't have right now and tell myself that I'm a lesser person for not having it. And that's where the trip up was. Imposter syndrome is going to happen. That never goes away, guys. Like, as a creative, we're always going to be ahead of what we're capable of. We're always going to dream bigger than what it is we can do in the present. But I had to learn to be content with what I made, because I felt so bad about myself that anything that I made was not worth protecting or preserving or charging the right amount of money for. I had to have a perspective change, and I had to just start writing things down. Writing down how I felt, writing down what I wanted, writing down what I don't want, and then burning it. Like, taking the things that were like, man, this person did this, and this, and set it on fire. Because it's gone. It's already happened. And you know what? I'm never going to allow that again within my capabilities, But sure. I had to have a complete perspective change, because it didn't matter if I made the perfect story and the perfect pages with the perfect lettering and had it done within, a couple of months. I would have hated everything about it because my mind was in the wrong place.
It's interesting. I came across this. It's like a short. And it was just a little snippet of an interview with Harlan Ellison. And how he was talking about comics in particular, and saying that, Marvel and DC, they make cowards out of comic creators, because they were the only game in town. So if you got fired from one, you had no choice but to work for the other. And I had mentioned this yesterday too on a different interview, but I'm curious because it's still been on my mind. But I think this is that thing. It's like, when it comes to the comics industry in general, it has become so much larger than that now, that the work itself is not something that is doesn't have the same perception of meaninglessness as it did back when they were just pumping stuff out back in the day. Like, even then, it was meaningful, but it just wasn't given the lividity that it deserved, because this was before all the craze of comic book properties and all this stuff. And again, you've been handling so many things on top of the fact that from what I know of you, you were dealing with past traumas, dealing with current traumas, dealing with physical limitations, and then building this other thing. But you haven't been quiet either. I mean, it's like you've been doing conventions. You've traveled around the world, actually, to like talk at, different universities and things like that. You've gone to different parts of the world and stuff like that. You've had involvement in some, pretty big properties. You've had a hand in creating a new character for Marvel this year.
Yes.
So it's like you've been really hard at work. And I think all that stuff can kind of have a very pausing effect on your personal work, because it's just it makes you question so many things. Like, when you're seeing like what Marvel's doing with this character, you're thinking to yourself, all right, well, how does this apply to what I'm doing, and how can I make this better? Like what you were mentioning earlier about value. It's like, it's very hard to place a value on something that's so personal, like, and that comes from you. Because on one hand, you you're doing this because you want to express yourself, but you're also doing it because you want to get it out there. You want it to feed you. You want it to put a roof over your head. You know, and there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah.
I want to make something that outlives me.
Sure.
I want to make a legacy. You know, I worked on Kahori, issue 1, Reshaper of Worlds, the new Mohawk character with Marvel, and it was featured on their What If series. And I guess to speak about what you were saying before, Marvel and DC kind of being the only games in town, that was definitely true for a time.
Yeah, definitely during Harlan's era. I mean, this is probably
what?
pre-Image, pre-Dark Horse. So I mean, this is a different era. I don't think it applies to what's going on now, which is why I kind of brought it up. But you know, still,
yeah, it's still a gate,
right?
You know, it's one of those, right? It's definitely one of those places that they are the companies that can validate you. Right. That most of the Images and the Dark Horses and all the things that came after that, they went through Marvel and DC first. They were the couriers of the new old gods.
Right.
You know, they hold the new mythologies, but they can't talk about everything. You know, and that's where independent stories come in. You know, I make the analogy with Marvel and DC and ships all the time. Back to the boats. Okay.
Well, you know, that's why I was mentioning, just to be clear, I wasn't trying to refer to it in a condescending way, but
no,
like,
not at all.
When you're working with these bigger companies, Marvel and DC, you're running on a tight ship, and it is very, very demanding. It's not
it is.
Working in independent comics is also demanding, but you're going at your pace. You know, no one's waiting every month for your book to come out. It's a very different demand, you know. And in a sense, you're working kind of, I don't want to say backwards because it's not backwards, but you're working in one style of producing versus another style of producing, which is a very different. It requires you to put on a very different mindset, you know. At least that's my take of it.
Right, you're right. You know, working for the big two or any major property, especially a well-known property, the challenge is not to get people to care about it. It's to get people to care about your version of it. So you are putting a new perspective on an existing legacy that comes with its own set of problems. How do you make Superman exciting again? What do you put in the trailer that makes you want to go and see it?
Yeah, but I mean, you know,
how do you pull on those heartstrings?
And I'll tell you how they did it. I'll tell you how they did it. It was the dog, you know, and Dean Hitchfield this morning, he had mentioned it, and we won't sit on the trailer for too long, but he had mentioned that in the first Superman movie, when Superman first rescues Lois, he goes, "I got you," and she goes, "Well, who's got you?" And if you notice in this trailer, you know, James Gunn answers this, you know, like Krypto's got Superman, you know, and I think that's what got everybody. I mean, I know that's what got everybody. Everybody's crying because of the dog, you know, just seeing them run to you. It's like, you know, and dogs really just speak to everybody, because anybody who doesn't like dogs, I think they're not human. I don't understand how you cannot like dogs, but
it's the relationship.
It's the relationship, but it's finding that human element, and I think it's just as hard in mainstream as it is in independent.
Absolutely. It's just when you're working on an independent, you've got to get to someone to care about something that you care about. Whereas when you're working on a major property, you've got to get them to care about something a new version of what they already know? How do you give something that is known the unknown? You're giving them a new scenario for them to consider, not a new character to become a part of their world. Like, so the difference between working on an and also on an independent, you are responsible for everything. Whereas when you're working for a major company, you're a part of a team. And yes, they can cover more ground. You can get higher quality stuff because they've got a bigger budget. They have access to the best creators in the world. They have, they have resources. They can, expand and share their book to the corners of the globe ad infinitum. They can make films about it. And when you're an independent creator, all you have is what you are capable of doing and who you can pull into your sphere. And so, yes, the quality might be a lot less considering on your resources, but you're doing something that they can't do. So these larger ships, they can go from here to Tokyo in the time that you would take your whole life to paddle to.
But they started out the same way that, that we're starting
That's
out.
right.
It's not
Exactly.
like it was just, no one knew when Fantastic Four issue 1 came out that it was going to be the world's greatest comics book. In fact,
that's right.
People will say that it's debatable even now. But
right.
But no one
and
knew
it grew.
Yeah, it grew.
It didn't start off great. It grew. I mean, it started off with fantastic stories and things that people hadn't heard of before. But one writer didn't just create the entire world. It's changed, it's evolved, it's had a lot of different hands, put different spices into this pot, and it's gotten to melt down and evolve over time. Like, imagine if you had 100 years to write your story, like how many ways you could rewrite and get rid of the redundancies. So you have a lot working against you as an independent creator.
You are literally, especially in your case, I think in your case it's a lot, and I think a lot of people just can't even begin to fathom because I know what goes into this. Like I do it myself, and I'm
right.
When I look at your undertaking, I'm like, Jesus, she's like Atlas trying to carry the world on her shoulders up a mountain, like uphill. It's not just, hey, just carry this. It's walk up a mountain now. It's a lot different. It's like you're interweaving different forms of media into this one thing. And the amount of progress that you've made, I mean, honestly, just based on everything that you've shown me, it's just been so enormous. Like the amount of growth that I've seen come from this, no matter how slow or how long it's taken, has been immense. And the thing is that once it's out there, it doesn't matter anymore how long it took, because now it's there, it exists. So like
That's
no
true.
one cares that no one cares that this was in production for X amount of time. The fact is that it exists, and we're lucky that we have it, because we very well could not have had it. Like, what if your personal traumas had kept you from answering those questions that you needed to have? What if you closed up? What if your physical injuries led to something far worse that you couldn't have recovered from? We wouldn't get it. So whatever pace you're moving at, especially given all the other things that you're doing on top of that, which are extremely demanding. I don't think Marvel just says, hey, create a new character for us and take your time with it. Like if you need like 6 months, hey, if you need 100 years to create a character for us, take it. We're fine. We don't. There's no rush. Like it doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
And I think it would not have been as good of a story if I had put it out in the time that I had aimed for. My headspace, to the people in my life, to just the kind of book that I wanted to make, it would not have been as good as I think it will be when this is finished. And I guess I was too focused on taking the things that were painful, that had happened in my life, and getting it off of me and just putting it on the character without really considering what the character wanted or why they were going through this and what kind of person it made them. And so I started to get stuck. And then I also had a lot of conflicting voices, people telling me, well, a story about this is just not very entertaining. But one thing I noticed is that success is hinged upon how much truth you can face and not run away. And so there were a lot of truths that I needed to face about myself, about my characters, about the structure of the story, and some of the things that I was quoting as far as legends were concerned that were not true. Who was I independently of making things? I'm a person who likes to create an environment. I'm a person who likes to help. I'm a person who engages people's senses. I like to cook. I like to make music. I like to make art. That's your stomach. That's your eyes. That's your ears. I like to create an environment that alters the way people feel for the better. I like to make people comfortable. I like to make people feel appreciated, loved, worthy, because those are the things that I want for myself. And I remember in those moments when I wasn't feeling worthy, when I wasn't feeling loved, when I wasn't feeling respected, that making art, that having really good food, or that listening to the right song completely altered my consciousness. So
you know, one other thing I want to add to that is I think you also like to make people think. Because yes. I seriously have had some of the most thought-provoking conversations with you. I mean, and it always gets me to think about, you know, different aspects. And all the other things you said are 100% true, but that was just, you know, that's another caveat too. I mean, there are so many things that we've had conversations about relating to science and all these other things that, you know, have gotten me to just ponder stuff. And I think that's important. It's that curiosity that kind of keeps us going too as humans. And one of those things that I think people are going to be spending a lot of time doing. Like yesterday, I read an issue of Ultimate Spider-Man. It was the latest issue, and I wasn't really looking forward to reading this book because it's sometimes like it feels like a little bit of a chore for some reason. I know a lot of people love it, so anyone who hears me saying this right now is like, "What? How could you feel that way?" But sometimes I just feel that way when I pick up a comic. It's not necessarily that I don't like it, but it's like you really have to be invested in order to read it. And let's be honest, there's a lot of things that can be our time can go into outside of comics. Like if I'm going to read comics, I have to be focused. So as I was reading this book, I started paying attention to all the little nuances. And the thing about this particular issue of Spider-Man was there was no fighting at all. It was actually a Christmas party that was being held at the Parker's household. And we got to see what was going on with all the characters. So there was no punches thrown at all. The only character that did not speak throughout the entire comic was Peter Parker. And I noticed that right away. And it's like those little subtle nuances when you can catch them and pick up on them and start to see, okay, there's got to be a reason why he's not talking. And of course, you're going to find out the answer of why he's not talking. It's all tied together in a very interesting way that advances the story. And I think that's something that, you know, we should always be looking for in comics. Or what are the things we're noticing? You know, it's not just, hey, Hulk is fighting Abomination again and they're trading punches. Like that punch has got to mean something, you know?
Right. What would cause someone to want to ball up their fist and strike another human? It's those kinds of scenarios. And yes, I do like to make people think. It's something that I I hold very dear and personal to me because when I was younger, my father and I, we wouldn't speak very much, but when we did, we would talk about the nature of reality. We would sit and we'd watch, Star Trek together. And I was like, Dad, well, why won't we live in the stars? And then he would explain why. He would explain the problems with space. He would explain the problems. Like we would have conversations about, the world. And you mentioned that I was traveling, and I was invited to an aerospace event. It was the largest aerospace and aeronautics event in the world, in Las Vegas, Nevada, called Ascend. So we've got NASA, Lockheed, Boeing, the AIAA, people dealing with space trash. I didn't even know that was a thing. But
space trash. Yeah, that's
space trash.
It's gonna be, yeah, it has to be. There has to be space trash.
You've got all of these satellites and things that are up there, and we've got, asteroids and, rocks that hit it, break it apart, and it just stays within our orbit. And then it hits other things, and those things break off. And so you've got to have like a sanitation department for space. It sounds like the premise of a comic, but I sat next to a guy on a plane heading to the same place, and we spoke about it. I was like, this is crazy.
It is crazy. But it makes sense.
But the reason that I was, I actually wasn't 100% sure why I was invited to this event. They wanted to have someone on a panel about science fiction converting into science fact. But I volunteered to perform at the beginning of this event. Now you've got, rocket scientists and engineers and tech gurus and people who build, satellites that are the size of lunchboxes that are like $5 million. Plated in gold and transmitting, their entire cloud server to them across the globe. I mean, we're talking crazy high-tech stuff. And these people are from all over the world. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here? But at 8 a.m, I go there with my friend Frankie Freeman, who is an amazing dancer. She's a stunt woman, and she was the body double for Cyclone on Black Adam with The Rock. And she is a crazy dancer. I mean, like pop locking backflips, but she's very emotive. She's really cool and a really silly gal. She's definitely a cool sister to know. And she's a martial artist. And so I sing a song that I wrote for my mermaid book called Pluto as a Planet. The folks kind of got a chuckle out of that. But I made a video as it was playing, and she was dancing, and I was singing in this sparkly dress in Las Vegas. Guys, it's Vegas. And the video shows life starting from microbial matter into fungus, into complex organisms, into a forest, into a fire, into industry, into, the tech age, into the futuristic age, into a cosmic age. And showing just the evolution of all of that, but also the integration of nature within that in order for it to succeed. And what I wanted to do was show them the power of engaging your other senses, because they deal in the theoretical, they deal in the scientific, they deal in concrete things that they can prove or they theorize they can prove, right? The problem is the issues that they're facing. One, there are not enough people who are young enough to be able to endure space travel because it's very hard on the body. And also the technical burdens of being able to deal with, you've got all of these things that could go wrong and the astronaut has to be the engineer and the pilot at the same time. You know, they've got to do so many things, and they've got all these different people in their ear, and they don't have gravity to ground them. They have to try and like manipulate all of these wires with sausage finger gloves so their fingers don't freeze on the outside of their ship that they're tethered to by a little arm and could get blown out into oblivion. No pressure.
Well,
So they need.
speaking of that, we do kind of have to wrap this up.
Oh,
I
okay.
hate to do this because we could keep
No, that's
talking,
okay.
but our time is coming to a close.
I'll wrap this up real quick.
No, this has been such a phenomenal conversation. But yes, please wrap up, and then if you can, let us know where we can find you and all those wonderful details.
So they wanted to know how they could get younger people into the sciences so they can help them problem solve. And then how can they solve some of the problems that they're facing? One, you need to talk to artists about your problems, or kids, because we're not anchored by reality. We deal in the fantastic. If you give us a problem, stories are problem solving. We will come up with a device or a teleporter or a self-vacuuming robot like in the Jetsons, or a phaser, a taser. We come up with objects that fix the problems that reality has. A lot of sci-fi went into the future and fixed problems that hadn't even existed yet. And now science fiction became science fact. They're dealing with what they can prove and what they have, accessible to them now, or the things that are just ahead of their capabilities. But in order to even consider something new, you have to go beyond what is available to you now. And secondly, if you want people to come to the sciences, you've got to go to them, go to where they are. So more than likely, you'll see NASA at Comic-Con. Go up to them, see how you can help. There might be something within your writing, within the things that you do, but maybe it's not, it's not off the table for you to be compartmentalized in just the thing that you're good at. Perhaps your expertise offers a new perspective in an existing form of mastery, an existing form of artwork. You elevate the craft when you come with a different perspective in doing things that haven't already been done. And so traveling and speaking to students and teaching has helped me learn more about myself and my craft. And so on Instagram, you can find me at Afua_Richardson. I'm on AfuaRichardson.com. I've got my store and things for sale. I've got a Discord and a Facebook, Dr. Fu's Lab. But you can also reach out if you have any questions. More than likely, I'll answer them. But think about some of the things that you want to make. If there's something that you had the resources to make right now, realistically think about how you would make that happen. Now, I spent so much time thinking about the next job or the bills and things like that. I didn't really think about what I wanted to make or how I wanted to make people feel when they interacted with it. And so now I'm answering those questions for myself. And it's a lot of fun.
Honestly, we just scratched the tip of the surface. But I want to say this. I really want you to come back when you have the book done. And even before that, when you got anything new that you want to talk about, we at the experience wants to have you on here. So this is not the end. It is only the beginning. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule, because you are very, very busy. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your journey and your struggles so far and how you've overcome it. It's it's an inspiration, and you've always been a huge inspiration to me. But I think a lot of the people who are going to watch this interview are going to be really inspired too. So thank you for being here and for doing this with us.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Thank you so much. You guys rock. Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2025.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.